welcome everybody to today's session of the Cybersecurity Chat. We really appreciate your participation. I'm Mark Lupker, the Director of Education for the Cyber Center for Education and Innovation out of the National Cryptologic Museum here in Fort Meade, Maryland, outside of the National Security Agency. My cohort Christine is with me today, and we have the great pleasure of introducing to you Monica Ruiz from the Hewlett Foundation. She's going to be addressing philanthropy today in cybersecurity and why that's important. Plus, we're really excited about her talking about how she got into cybersecurity. Monica has a lot of experience in this particular field. In fact, she is the program fellow for the Cyber Initiative and Special Projects at the Hewlett Foundation. And she did a travel to Estonia and did research with Estonia. It's a great place. I got to travel there during my NATO operations, and it's a beautiful country. So I'm look forward to maybe her giving us some thoughts about her travels to Estonia. As Estonia is very virtual in their environment, they lead NATO in a lot of the cybersecurity issues. So with that, we'd love to turn this over to Monica, and she can talk to us about philanthropy.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate that kind introduction. And thank you to everyone at the NCE for the opportunity to share my journey into the field of cybersecurity, but also talk about the role of philanthropy in this very essential place. And so I thought I'd start a little bit with my background and then go into the substance of what I wanted to cover during this Zoom call. And so my name is Monica Ruiz. I am an Ecuadorian-born U.S. citizen, and I was raised in Miami as the youngest in a family of 6. And during my upbringing, my parents always encouraged my 2 older brothers, my sister and I, to be very curious and forward-leaning in things that were of interest to us, which is where my interest more broadly in international relations stems from. And so by the time I got to college, I was focusing on international relations, but I decided to study abroad and go to China for a semester. And so when I was applying to go to China, what interested me the most is the fact that it was a country that I had zero exposure to. I knew very little about. And I was excited at the opportunity of learning about a new culture, a new language, a new lifestyle. And so went to China, was there for 6 months, completed my minor in international studies, and was fascinated. In fact, I learned a lot about the culture and the country, but also a lot about me, given that I put myself in a situation where I had not been before. And so returned back to the US, finished my degree, and then was eager to once again venture out. And so I continued my interest and focus on international studies. And I decided to apply for a scholarship that would send me to South Korea for a year to teach English. And so once again, that exposed me to a very new environment, and it really broadened my understanding of the world. But what was interesting about that experience is that I was living very close to a US Air Force base in a very small town in South Korea named Gunsan. And so more and more, I started to learn about security policy issues more specifically. And little by little, I started narrowing my focus. And so finished my 1-year scholarship in South Korea, returned back to the US, and I started interning at US Southcom. And US Southern Command is essentially one of the unified combatant commands under the Pentagon with a regional area of focus of what the US military is doing in Latin America. And so my role there, when I started off as an intern and then later I was hired on as a contractor, was to work in the interagency partnering directorate. So there was a lot of coordination across the command in terms of what are different interagencies doing, Southcom's area of responsibility, along with the Department of Defense. And so while I was at Southcom, I was delving deeper and deeper into security policy issues. And that's also where I met my lifelong mentors who have been instrumental for my growth and the folks that I attribute a lot of my work in the cybersecurity space to. And that's when I also decided to continue my studies. And so I applied to go to grad school and decided to attend the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. And at the Fletcher School, I continued my interest more broadly in international relations, but with a focus on international security studies and conflict resolution. But there, I became more interested in tech policy issues with a particular focus on cybersecurity policy. And so, what excited me about it particularly is the fact that it's still a relatively new yet constantly evolving field. And what became clear to me is that cybersecurity really is a vertical within an organization. So it's applicable all the way from the president or CEO to the entry level individual that's joining the organization. So it really cuts across all levels. But it's also, horizontal in terms of the fact that it cuts across sectors and regions. And so I started learning more and more about different incidents that had already happened. And I started studying the theory and the causes to what led to it. And so, finishing my degree at the Fletcher School, I accepted a researcher position at the Belfer Center at Harvard Kennedy School, given that they have the cybersecurity project there. And that's where I started analyzing theories of cyber offense and defense, cybersecurity regulations, and other foreign policy topics that really prepared me for my 1-year fellowship to Estonia. And Estonia, Mark, as you made reference to, it's an interesting country for many reasons. I mean, it's small in that it's 1.3 million people, but it's one of the early victims of a cyber incident in 2007. So, just to elaborate a little bit on that, in 2007, the Estonian government decided to relocate a Soviet war memorial from the middle of the city of Tallinn, which is the capital of Estonia, to the outskirts. And that triggered a response from a lot of folks who live in Estonia and also live in the surrounding countries. And so during that year, there was an incident where there were distributed analysis service attacks that were targeting financial and government websites that essentially flooded them and took them offline. That was a big flag for Estonia at the time. And so more and more they started adopting innovative models to improve their cyber defenses. But to follow on to what Mark said, Estonia is now one of the most digitally connected countries in the world. And so you have the NATO Cyber Center of Excellence there. But while I was in Estonia, I was working at an international security policy think tank called the International Center for Defense and Security. And while I was there, I was interested in learning about how the Estonians think through their cybersecurity strategy, and more broadly, how are Europeans approaching these issues. But specifically, what I started diving into is the fact that the Estonians have developed an innovative model that's called the Estonian Defense League Cyber Defense Unit. And so this is essentially a model that integrates outside talent, primarily private sector talent, into public sector cyber defense for if and when the situation arises. And that just goes to show that Estonia is a relatively small country, so a lot of individuals have to wear multiple hats. And this is one of the hats that they would wear. And so what was interesting to me is how the Estonians have made a model like this work and what would be a US equivalent to this? How can I build a comparative framework and model that could be applied in a US context? And so finishing my 1-year fellowship in Estonia, I continued my research and I started identifying states that were also adopting innovative models to integrate outside talent. One of the ones that surfaced based on my research is Michigan. Michigan has something called the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps that is very much aligned with what the Estonians were doing in terms of integrating this much needed talent at the state level. In addition to that, Maryland has a sister city partnership with Estonia, particularly Tallinn, and they work with the Estonian Defense League Cyber Defense Unit. Particularly, I think they're 175th Auxiliary Unit in their National Guard. And so more and more I started learning about what the states are already doing to integrate more talent into this. And I continued my research to really branch out and understand how states are approaching this and what they're adopting. So this leads me to my current role at the Hewlett Foundation, which is one that I took on shortly after I got back from Estonia. And the Hewlett Foundation has been an incredible opportunity because To be candid with all of you, I had very little experience in the philanthropic sector before going in. And that's again one of the reasons that I was excited to join and learn more. And so when I accepted the offer from the Hewlett Foundation, this was for the role that I'm currently in, which is dual hatted. So I'm the fellow for the cyber initiative, but I'm also the fellow for the special projects program. And so to provide some general background about the Hewlett Foundation is a nonpartisan charitable foundation that strives to promote a better world. It was established in 1966 by engineer William Hewlett, who is one of the co-founders of Hewlett Packard, and his wife, Flora Hewlett. And today, it is one of the largest philanthropic institutions in the US. They award roughly $400 million in grants per year to organizations across the world that support a variety of efforts that advance education for all, preserve the environment, support climate change research, improve the lives and livelihoods of individuals in developing countries, promote health and economic well-being of women, but also, and this is where the cyber initiative comes in, they support cybersecurity field building. And so I should note it's wholly independent of HP Inc. and the Hewlett Packard Enterprise and the Packard Foundation. It's a standalone private charitable foundation. But going into the cyber initiative, it's a unique effort because it was started in 2014 and it is now a 10-year, $132 million effort that supports organizations that are working to develop thoughtful, multidisciplinary solutions to complex cyber challenges. And really the goal that appealed to me the most when I started at the Hewlett Foundation, and particularly the goal of the cyber initiative, is to catalyze better policy outcomes to benefit societies around the world. And so it's clear to me that for years, the intelligence community has identified cyber as one of the biggest national security threats. And it's also surfaced the need to build a field of experts with multidisciplinary expertise who can work together with government, industry, and civil society to solve these very pressing and critical problems. And so this brings me to the role of philanthropy. And the role of philanthropy is unique and essential in the sense that it provides nimble and strategic support for long-term efforts that benefit society as a whole. And so to put that in the context of cybersecurity policy, you have industry partners that are primarily focused on building new technologies and developing new products for the user. Government, on the other hand, addresses a lot of these cyber incidents that may arise and are focusing on developing policies that address these incidents. But philanthropy has a much longer term focus in the sense that they provide funds to build a field. They encourage collaborations across stakeholders that are focusing on these issues. Philanthropy can also play a very unique role in trying to diversify the cybersecurity field. And so a lot of our grant making has a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens to it because we believe that a diverse field is what is needed to have an effective field. And in addition to that, philanthropy is unique in the sense that it's a neutral player in this space. And so we're actively trying to break down silos of communities that are actively focused on these issues. And so one of the things that I've noticed since I've started in this space is that oftentimes you have individuals that have a policy and a legal background, and they tend to be based in the East Coast. And then you have individuals that have a technical understanding and practical skills of these issues that are based in the West Coast. But more and more, you're seeing that overlap. You're seeing that change, which I think is incredible and very promising to the field. And I think philanthropy has a big role to play in that as well. I think that we should not only be grant makers, but we should be connectors. We should start actively and proactively building that connective tissue to grow the field. And that's yet another reason why I think philanthropy in this space of cybersecurity is so uniquely positioned to look at the long-term benefits for society in terms of building this field. And so the cyber initiative particularly supports cybersecurity policy research. It supports the educating of future generations, and it really promotes a better understanding of cybersecurity more broadly. And just a few examples of some of the grants that we've made under the cyber initiative is, for example, a grant to create a database of qualified experts in technology policy from diverse backgrounds is called SourceList. And SourceList was essentially led by Susan Hennessy, who is one of the leading editors at Brookings Institute and Lawfare. And she believes that this field needs to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive, and we certainly do as well. So that's one resource that's available to anyone who needs it. It's essentially a website where conference organizers or journalists or researchers or folks interested in these issues like you all can go in and access to get a sense of who is working on certain issues that are of interest to me and who should I contact to just have a conversation with and get a better understanding as to how these issues are evolving. Another example is a grant that was made to the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and this was for the creation of a master's in cybersecurity and public policy. But it also helped promote and help support the bridge professorship of a professor from Tufts University School of Engineering to the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy to once again build those bridges of people that have the technical know-how, but also have that policy know-how. So it's been an incredible experience for me to be at the Hewlett Foundation and have that unique vantage point to the field, but also play an active role in helping it grow and mature. The one last thing I should say is that I have continued my research that started from when I was in Estonia. And so I have been trying to identify what are different vehicles that the US can use to integrate outside talent. And one of the ones that I've identified is the role of the National Guard. And so I've started researching what different states have done in terms of using the National Guard to really address certain gaps that exist in the talent pool, and how have they been operationalized in this context. And so it's been really exciting to learn about what different states are doing. And I'm to the point where I've met folks in the National Guard in California, where I'm currently based, and there's interest in terms of adapting new models to integrate more talent for what California is doing to beef up their cyber defenses. So that was also a very positive effort that I was fortunate enough to learn more about and now be involved in. So I think to end, the two main takeaways that I wanted to share with you all is, number one, philanthropy focuses on long-term efforts because technology alone cannot protect us from cybersecurity threats. And so that's why collaboration and building the talent pipeline and supporting resources that provide a better understanding of these issues to society is critical. And philanthropy has a unique role to play in that. But secondly, I would emphasize the importance of embracing your curiosity and always leaning forward if there's something that is of interest to you and exciting to you, and the importance of learning more. And I should say that is what led me to enter the field of cybersecurity, and I'm very happy and fortunate to have done that. So with that, I'm excited to address some of your questions.
I think your point about the collaboration and the challenges therein, and the things that Hewlett Foundation has sponsored, and obviously you've sponsored us for our curriculum development. But the question centers around, how do we continue to get our arms around all the great work that's happening out there to ensure we can leverage each other's work, minimize that duplication, and to move things ahead faster?
Thanks for that question, Mark. And I think that that's spot on in terms of things that we're thinking about as well. So one of the things that we try to do at the Hewlett Foundation is be very open and transparent with everything that we've supported. And so all of the grants that are finalized and processed across programs, and in my case, in the cyber initiative and special projects, are published on our website. You can see what organization was granted, what amount, and for what purpose. And we do that for transparency, but we also do that, to your point, Mark, to avoid the duplication of efforts. We also want to be active connectors in this space. So a lot of the conversations that we oftentimes have with grantees or prospective grantees is we share what we know that is already happening in this field, and we try to build that connective tissue. And so if we learn about research that is taking place at a university in Montana, and that aligns with an existing grant that we have made to a think tank in DC, we facilitate that connection and we try to build those relationships to really move the needle forward on this. And I'm excited to say that we also attend a lot of events. We attend a lot of conferences. We like to speak on panels in order to share a lot of the information and insights that we've gleaned given our vantage point to the field.
Thank you. I have another question from one of the students. It talks about your comment about cyber policy, and the student was relating that they thought cybersecurity was all technical, and so is there some additional comments you can talk about the non-technical aspects of cybersecurity that people may be interested in that may not have a desire to go into computer science?
And I think that's a great question. I think cyber policy is so uniquely essential for this field because it has, those technical components to it, but it also has societal components to it. How can individuals protect themselves online, and what are measures that they can adopt to be, good stewards of the resources and tools that they have access to? So policy in the sense of what are measures that individuals can take in terms of adopting two-factor authentication, in terms of keeping sites of what are fishy emails that you shouldn't click on, but also policy goes broader to, what are types of policies that companies are adopting and encouraging their users and even employees to keep in mind. And then even more broader than that, what are policies that the U.S. government is rolling out to better protect itself and its agencies? And so to your question, I think it has technical components to it, but it also has societal and personal human elements to it that really speak to the importance of how we can behave and better protect ourselves online. And that's as important now more than ever. In addition to, understanding the technical aspects of it, I would argue the policy and societal aspects of it are as important.
As a follow-on question, someone wrote about the collaboration between corporate entities, and wanted your thoughts about how those partnerships work, how they get started, what type of experiences has Hewlett found in corporations' willingness to get together and collaborate?
And I also think that's a wonderful question, right? Because part of the thing that I made reference to in my remarks is the fact that philanthropy has a huge role to play in really facilitating those collaborations. And so the Hewlett Foundation is based out of Silicon Valley and Menlo Park. And so we have access to a couple of the tech companies that are based in the area. And that essentially allows us to host events in our offices and bring representatives from all these tech companies to our offices, and also bring in folks from the foundation and bring in grantees that are interested in these issues. And so oftentimes what we do is we'll essentially tell all of our grantees, if you ever need our spaces for a workshop on, let's say, encryption, we're happy to host the workshop here in a neutral space and bring out all the contacts that we have in these tech companies, or if you have contacts in these tech companies, please feel free to bring them along so we can talk about these issues in a neutral and constructive way. And oftentimes folks will come and they will actively try to find solutions to these problems, given that not one sector can solve them. These are problems that need coordination really across the board and across different levels. And so I'm happy to say that I've been witness to multiple efforts that have included individuals across sectors that are actively working on these things. Another example that I have of a grant that we've made is a grant to the Harvard Berkman Center, and this is for the creation of the Berkeley Group. And the Berkeley Group essentially brings together senior current U.S. government officials, so folks from the National Security Agency or folks from the Federal Bureau of Investigations and across the board. It also brings together academics and also private sector representatives and civil society individuals to talk about these issues, because you need to start building that trust network of folks with different skill sets. But you also need to put them in one room to work together on these very hard policy issues that we've already briefly discussed.
So, Monica, we have a question about internships. You had mentioned the internship that you were able to obtain. How did you get your internship, and what what advice do you have for, students now on internships that they should look into?
Sure. Thanks for that question, Hussein, and to the student who asked it. So the way I was able to find that opportunity to intern at U.S. Southern Command was through my university. And so because my focus was on international relations more broadly, but I started getting into security policy issues more specifically, I spoke to professors at my university and I started sharing my interests with them. I started looking for opportunities that would align with what I had done thus far and frankly, what I wanted to learn more about. And they facilitated an introduction to the deputy director of the J9 Partnering Directorate there, given that there was a relationship with the university and Southcom. And so one of the things that I would encourage all of you to do is to have those conversations and always take someone's offer to introduce you to someone, accept it. Be sure to always be forward-leaning and open to having those conversations, because you may find out that you didn't know about something that you otherwise would really like to do. And so that's what led me to my role at Southcom.
Terrific. And for students that may not have never really put the two together of cybersecurity and policy, what can students do in high school that they should think about if what you're mentioning today is something that they might want to pursue? What are some of the things that they can do as a freshman, sophomore, senior in high school?
I think one of the first things I would say is do some research. Try and figure out what are those different think tanks that are focusing on cyber policy issues doing? What are they writing about? What are their arguments? And start reading a lot of this material that's widely available online. I would also say follow the news. Sign up for different distribution letters. There's an interesting newsletter that Politico offers that covers a lot of cybersecurity news that I would encourage all of you to check out. But also identify different podcasts that may be of interest to you. So just a couple that come to mind, the Rational Security podcast that's hosted by Shane Harris and has other individuals that work at the Brookings Institute, like Ben Wittes and Tamara Kaufman-Wittes and Susan Hennessy, is a very great resource to get a sense as to what is going on in the national security world more broadly, but they touch on cybersecurity issues more specifically. And so I would just encourage all of you to get access to a lot of these resources that are available online. And the last thing that comes to mind, especially given that now there's been a big shift to virtual meetings, is find these webinars and join in. I would say certainly listen in and learn, but also encourage you to participate and actively ask questions. And, to my takeaway, embrace your curiosity. Make sure you're always trying to understand and learn more.
We've got another question that kind of takes a little bit of a right turn here on the whole talk about policy. It basically encouraged a question about law, and so the question was more specific on maybe your perception, your experience, your insight into how cyber law is today and where the challenges lie in that particular aspect of cybersecurity.
I think that's a really good question. And I think law is still an evolving and maturing element in this field of cybersecurity for multiple reasons. Right? I feel like it's still a new and constantly evolving field. And I do think there's still terms that are being used by different stakeholders that have different meanings when they're used. And so there's this active push to establish cyber norms to then inform what different cyber laws should look like. And so you have efforts being done by the NATO Cyber Center of Excellence in Tallinn, where they published the Tallinn Manual 1.0 and the Tallinn Manual 2.0. And these are essentially norms that are identified as to how states should behave online to again inform the creation of these laws. So I think that question is spot on, but I do think there are measures that are being taken in order to inform what that cyber law, index should look like. Another thing that comes to mind that I would encourage you to look through is the role of the UN group of government experts and the fact that they have also identified different measures that states across the board should take, not states, but countries across the board should take online. And so looking through the report that they published in 2013 and 2015 to identify what are those norms that were widely accepted and adopted at that international organization level to then inform what happens in the law realm of cybersecurity.
Okay, Monica, that's all the questions we had in the chat room. And we really want to appreciate the fact that you joined us here today and provided this great talk on philanthropy. And on behalf of the Cyber Center for Education Innovation, we thank you for your presence here. Do you have any closing thoughts for us?
Sure, Mark. No, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the opportunity to share my insights, my road, and my journey into the field of cybersecurity, but more specifically, the role that philanthropy plays in this space. And so thank you all for your time and your questions and your interest, and I look forward to learning from you.
Oh, excellent. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us today. We encourage you to continue to watch the site for the future cybersecurity chats. We'll be also participating in a Nepris summer camp and looking forward to November when we have a very focused event where during November, week of November 9th, is the Cybersecurity Career Awareness Week. And so we'll be hosting several panels during that week, as well as cyber chats throughout the next school year. So thank you very much. We appreciate everybody here and have a great day.